This is a live mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We're on the air.
Keep Prophecy song. No.
Good evening, welcome. The Kennebunkport Zoning Board of Appeals. It's February 10th. I call the meeting to order. According to the agenda, first matter will be attendance, which I'll take. Kevin McDonald.
Here.
Wayne Fessenden.
Here.
Karen Schlegel.
Here.
April Defoe.
Here.
And Gordon Ayer is not here. Next matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for September 24, 2019, but I believe we do not have those minutes. So we'll table that until our next meeting, which brings us to the application before us. So I'll read it and then also correct it as it's listed on the agenda. Serene M. Matheson, for approval to create a home occupation within her existing single-family home at 13 Spruce Avenue, Assessors Tax Map 28, Block 1, Lot 11. The agenda states that it's in the Cape Porpoise East Zone, but it's actually in the Farm and Forest Zone. Okay. So we'll begin first by having Mrs. Matheson address us, and then we'll hear from anybody else that wants to offer any comment from the public. And then we'll go to the code officer to the extent we need to hear from the code officer. And then we'll close the public hearing and we'll deliberate and then we'll render a decision. So please.
Good evening, board members and everyone present. My name is Serene Matheson, and we live in 13 Spruce Avenue, Kennebunkport. So we decided to share our heritage, our traditional South African rusk with the beautiful and wonderful people of Maine. We've been living here for 2.5 years, going for our third winter, and I've been baking rusks for neighbors and friends, and every time they tasted it, they really loved it and started saying, why don't I just market it? And that's how the whole thing started. So there's a whole story behind the rusk, and I think we wrote the story to all of you, and it's been passed on from generation to generation, and this is my mum's original recipe. So it doubles up as a breakfast snack or as a snack, healthy snack for kids, healthy snacks for adults. We eat it for breakfast. You dunk it in your special beverage, coffee, tea, hot cocoa, milk for the kids. And then I also developed a gluten-free option. So the state of Maine came out and I got my license, my food processing license approved, and my, what was the other license? Food processing and vendors to be able to wholesale and to retail. And then on Thursday evening is the hearing for my victualler's license in Kennebunkport too.
Okay. Why don't you stay there? See if, questions, anybody?
Well, do you want to go through the list?
Well, if anybody, yeah, I mean, we need to cover the ground here, and we need to get it of record, so why don't you begin, April?
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about how you plan to sell your product?
Absolutely. So I've been going to coffee shops and people in Kennebunkport and exposing them to the rusks. Obviously, no one knew what it was, but they loved it. They tried it. The shops want to actually have it in their shops. So I'm going to definitely aim for that to start off with. And then also on Facebook, I would have a page selling it for more than the coffee shops would sell it for. Everyone recommended the gluten-free option, and that's why I also opted for that option, for the gluten-free market. So there seems to be a huge market for the gluten-free, and also for the other one, having a lot of fiber, healthy fiber, and as a health rusk. So definitely to the coffee shops, and then to the wholesale or to the whole food markets. The state of Maine, Rhonda suggested places where she thought my product would be perfect, and I would also be marketing it there.
So you don't plan to have anybody come to your house?
Definitely not. We live in a very small, quiet neighborhood. We know everyone there. I was very grateful that our neighbors could make it tonight. We didn't expect them. But yes, everyone knows each other, and we don't want any traffic. And I said with the whole application, for our kids and for all the other kids, we want to keep it as safe and as simple and as quiet as possible. and I think the whole neighborhood feels that way. So before I actually presented before the letter came out to them, to the whole neighborhood, I presented them with a letter that we presented to the board just to make them aware that nothing's going to happen in the neighborhood. We're not planning on cars or traffic or anything like that. That's definitely not the idea in the neighborhood. And I can just add that when we rented the place before we bought it, it belonged to two separate families in the same neighborhood, and they were just planning on renting it out till they decided they wanted to sell it to people who had the same ideas and values and for the neighborhood, and we were lucky enough to be able to buy it.
So did you bring any with you? Like, I'm curious as to what it even looks
I
like.
actually did. So the smaller packet that I brought is the gluten-free, which will not be packaged in the small packet. That was just samples that I want to give out to all the coffee shops. And then the bigger packet, so the packaging will look like the big packet with the story of the rusk at the back. And then Northeast Laboratories did my labeling for me, both labels.
So if somebody,
Interesting.
you
Nicely
said you're gonna
done.
put a post on Facebook, so if somebody wants to, you're not just gonna sell wholesale, but also retail.
Correct.
So how does a retail purchase occur?
Right. So they would message me. I don't even have a website at the moment sorted out, but they would message me, and on a Friday I will be taking orders, and on a Friday I will deliver it after my Friday morning meeting at Consolidated for the kids. I will deliver it in the Arundel, Kennebunkport, and Kennebunk areas myself for the time being.
So no one will be coming, as you're implying, but just for specifics, no one will be coming to the
No.
property at all for this?
No, not at
Okay.
all.
No sign.
So, do you make this in your kitchen, or do you have a separate kitchen in the house?
No, I do it in my kitchen, and that is where Rhonda had to come out and my application with the agricultural department in order to approve that it was exactly according to their standards, their sanitization, and everything else. Yeah, so, and that only happened today. I actually brought the documentation with. So she had tests done, and she kind of she gave me some advice on the products and the sanitization, et cetera, and she was very happy and issued the licensing for the kitchen and for.
Oh, okay. Because that was a question about having the kitchen certified, but you did, so that's
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
No sign?
No,
Good. Any employees?
no.
Okay.
Will it just be you?
Yes, it will be, only me. And we were a little bit worried about putting the address onto the label, but then apparently it was FDA required that you need that address, because I was kind of a little bit wary that people would look at the address and come and look for where it was made, but yeah, it was a requirement to put the address on there.
Traffic. Could you just stay there if you would for a minute, two or more? Anybody have a question on any of the other criteria that we need to review? How many, I know it's in your materials, how many parking spaces are at your house?
There are 2 garages and 2 parking spaces in front of the garage, and then another one.
Okay.
Yeah. But as I said, ideally, no one should come to the house. We're very aware of traffic in the cul-de-sac.
Okay.
And storage of product that you've made, what are your plans for that? That's,
She actually looked at the storage today. She was very happy about the storage and exactly how it was packaged. And from the moment I produce the product, there's a drying process which actually takes numerous hours. And then after that, as it comes out of a very low temperature oven, It literally, you take it out and it gets packaged. So the packaging is right in the kitchen. There's ample space in the cupboards too for now.
For the storage of stuff.
Yes, and for storage, and also for my ingredients. She looked at that, and she was very happy with exactly how I stored the ingredients and how the packaging was, and how the product was handled in storage.
And that all happens in the kitchen space that you
Correct.
have on your diagram here?
Correct. Yes.
And for the product itself, do you go buy that, or does it get delivered to your house? And the packaging, do you go buy that, or does that get delivered? And the
Right.
labeling, tell us about that.
Okay. The labeling, I got it from the lab, and then from there, I printed at Staples. It was just the easiest way. We kind of looked at a lot of options, but it's just easier because it's in Biddeford and it's close by. And if I need it the same day, I could, access them and access it the same day. So that's all been sorted, and also to make changes was very easy. From the designer department to getting it printed, it's a few hours and it's all done. So I just drive out, I get it from there, and the ingredients I just buy. In future, I might look at bulk ingredients. At the moment, I just buy the ingredients. I make it with Bob's Red Mill flour and gluten-free flour, etc. So I wanted to stick with a brand that everyone knows and that is reputable, and the laboratory also recommended I stick with something that's really, good. It's a good product, and also for my normal flour. And at the moment, I just buy it at shops. If I'm busier than normal, I buy it at Hannaford's. Otherwise, I go to the market and I actually buy it at the market. So most products, are fairly accessible. And my packaging comes from Amazon. So that's super easy,
Okay.
with the packaging.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Public hearing being open, does anybody else have in the audience, have anything to say about the application?
Yeah, I do.
Would you mind coming up to, let us know who you are when you get up there?
Yeah. I'm Dennis Rogers. I live at 14 Spruce Avenue. And this, as she mentioned, there's 6 of us in the neighborhood. We're so happy to have these people here. They're a pleasure to have for neighbors. So I can speak for the 5 of us. There's no issues at all in terms of what could be considered as a problem. We don't have it, we have traffic in our neighborhood. People come up and drive around and drive out. I never understood what they do, but they do that. As far as concerns about a business that would be running, as she said, it'll be what they're doing is a regular business. It's not a big operation, but I must say the rusk is very, very good. You should try it. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please.
I just have a question for the board.
You can, but if you come up to the microphone.
So my question is more.
Could you tell us who your name is?
Oh, yes, Susan Gray, and I live at 14 Spruce Avenue with my husband, Dennis Rogers. My question is about the process, the laws, whatever they are. So does this change the zoning of our street, our neighborhood?
It does not.
Okay, good. And does this apply just to this situation, or if this is approved, does that mean that anybody there could come, next year or the year after and have a bookkeeping business or a hair salon or something like that in their house?
Well, anybody who wants to apply for a home occupation is entitled to do that. And then each application is going to be handled separately, individually. And there really isn't a relationship between one neighbor and another's application to perform something as a home occupation. As long as it meets all of the town's standards as interpreted by this board, that it would be permitted, and if it didn't, it would not be permitted.
Okay. And my last question, so the way this is approved right now, there's no retail thing happening on the property. Does that preclude, or does that mean that no retail could ever happen unless somebody came back and reapplied for another type of zoning appeal?
Well, first, yes, this doesn't allow for retail at the property. It's in that it's got to be a normal activity that could take place at a home, and then it has to have really limited impact on the neighborhood. That's a very important element of getting a home occupation. So if somebody had a business and then they wanted to convert that to a retail operation, this application, if it's granted tonight, would not allow for that. So that would need to be some other application to this board or some other board, but to take your house and to turn it into a retail facility with traffic and people coming all the time, that might well not meet the standards as defined in the land use ordinance of a home occupation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, thank you. Anybody else have anything to ask or comment upon? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to close the public hearing at this time. I'm going to ask the code officer, do you have anything to add to this one?
No, other than, the point was made as far as getting a copy of the license from the state. We would ask to get a copy of that so that we have that in our file as well. And I know the board has asked on previous applications whether or not there were any, restrictions, within the subdivision. So I looked back through a couple of some older iterations of the deed and found no such restrictions that would preclude this type of home occupation. Nor were there any notes on the subdivision plan that would, offer a different answer.
Great. Anybody question for Warner? Hearing none. Okay, we've heard. Anybody have any further questions for the applicant at all? Okay. Nope. Discussion?
At this point, I would think we would just go through the requirements of the home occupation and verify that each of them are satisfied. And
Okay with you guys?
does that sound like the right approach?
First requirement is it's customarily carried, this is under
7.6.
7.6A1 to 3, which is it's customarily carried on in a dwelling unit or in a structure customarily accessory to a dwelling unit. Anybody have a question on that? It seems like it meets that criteria.
Yep.
It's carried on primarily by a member or members of a family residing in the dwelling unit. Everybody tend to agree with that?
Good.
It does not materially injure the character or usefulness of the dwelling unit or accessory structure for normal residential purposes. Everybody satisfied with that? This isn't a vote, I'm just trying to make our walk through. Under section B, which is 9 sections, I believe, it's going to be, the home occupation shall be carried on wholly within the dwelling or accessory structure. I'm satisfied with that, too.
Satisfied? Yep.
The home occupation shall be carried on primarily by a member or members of the family residing in the dwelling unit, not more than 2 persons other than family members residing in the dwelling unit, shall be employed on the premises in connection with the home occupation. But we did have testimony that there'll be no employees. There shall be no exterior display, no exterior signs other than those permitted in Article 612E, no exterior storage of materials, and no other exterior indication of the home occupation, a variation from the residential character of the principal building. I believe that might also be met. Any questions with that? Number 4 is objectionable conditions such as noise, vibration, smoke, dust, electrical disturbance, odors, heat, glare, or activity at unreasonable hours shall not be permitted. Anybody have a question with regard to that? The traffic generated by such home occupation shall not increase the volume of traffic so as to create a traffic hazard or disturb the residential character of the immediate neighborhood. We're all good with that?
We discussed that.
We discussed that. In addition to the off-street parking provided to meet the normal requirements of the dwelling, adequate off-street parking shall be provided for the vehicles of each employee and the vehicles of the maximum number of users that the home occupation may attract during peak operating hours. Parking for more than one vehicle used primarily for the home occupation shall require explicit approval of the Board of Appeals, but I think we've been satisfied with the parking requirement. The home occupation may utilize not more than 20% of the dwelling unit floor area, provided that for the purposes of this calculation, unfinished business and attic space are not included. That is 7A. We can come back to that. I don't think we did any kind of calculation.
I did
You
a
did.
quick one.
Yeah.
It's a 2,500 square foot home, and it's 220 feet, it's the size of the kitchen. 220 square feet, so.
So it's less than 10%. Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Yes. Get that math going.
That's why you're here.
Oh, yeah. It was a tough calculation.
Okay, when doing that calculation, you can use unfinished attic and basement spaces and one accessory structure, but it doesn't sound like any accessory structure will be used. And then except in the free enterprise and the farm and forest zones, a home occupation shall not be permitted in a single-family dwelling in which there is an accessory apartment. This is in the farm and forest zone, so as such, this is not applicable, this particular restriction.
Because there's no apartment, yeah.
And is there an apartment in your accessory apartment?
She mentioned two owners, which made me curious.
They owned it prior, and they bought it from the two
Prior,
owners.
So there weren't two when they bought it?
There weren't two units, there were two people that lived on the
Right,
street that
that's-
owned it together
That's the
jointly.
question. Yeah, that was my
Two
question.
homeowners owned one home.
Just clearing
Yeah.
the prior.
And there is adequate parking, I think we've determined that. All right, so we've run through the criteria for home occupation as required under 7.6A 1 to 3 and B 1 to 9, and everybody seems to be satisfied with that. So I'm going to ask for a motion with regard to the application meeting those requirements.
I'll make a motion, we approve the application as presented to us.
All right.
I should add upon sampling, but I won't.
Yeah, there was no bribe because it wasn't open.
We'll have to go purchase them ourselves.
And then do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor, raise your hands. So that's 5 unanimously. You've been approved. Okay, thank you.
Congrats.
Question before you leave. How long did it take after you applied to the state for them to come out and review yesterday?
They have 30 days, but she was a little bit quicker than that. Yes.
So it's a 30-day process?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
okay.
Yes.
They
Can we
picked
just
it
have-
up, they speeded it up.
Can we ask one more follow-up? When will they be available in stores?
I hope as soon as possible. On Friday, I'm hoping. Yes, I spoke to the roasters of the Kennebunkport.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then Mornings in Paris seem very keen and keen with the other places, but definitely roasters of the Kennebunkport.
Okay. Mark that on our calendars.
Well, we wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
Much
Thank you.
success.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Oh, and don't forget these.
Okay, that's the end of that matter, and then, I wanted to take a moment on the record, to discuss an application that we did not have a hearing on as of yet. So there was, and actually, I couldn't find my materials on this beforehand. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So there was appeal made on behalf of, I'm going to mostly paraphrase here because I don't have my materials with me. There was appeal filed, everybody got a copy of it on behalf of Mr. Slager, who appeared before the board not that long ago when she had the hearing at that time. That appeal, as you will recall, was an appeal of the issuance of a building permit. And then this board rendered its decision that it was not a timely appeal. So there's a subsequent appeal, and that was an appeal, I interpreted it as an appeal of the form of follow-up to the was it a stop work order, Warner? Is that what it technically was?
No, it was a suspension.
A suspension. So there was suspension issued by the code enforcement officer of the project that abuts Mr. Slager's property. And then that suspension was addressed after materials were provided to the town, the code office, in the form of an email that you sent, Warner?
Correct.
And so their appeal was filed with regards to the form, I interpret it as the form of the follow-up on the suspension by Warner that he did by email. And it referenced certain sections of the land use ordinance which purported to require that Warner would be required to actually conclude his suspension by a particular formatted certification. So the appeal essentially, as my reading was, that it was for the form of the follow-up that Warner did. And is that how you interpreted the appeal itself?
Correct. It was as I understood it, it was a process question.
So,
Process.
given that I had been in contact with Warner after receiving that, and I wanted to know what the code office intended on doing, and the code office advised me that they would be reformatting their follow-up to the suspension. And that was done after a study of materials by the code officer. And the format that follow-up was done in, we can't pass judgment on it, but it might be fair to say one could interpret it as having met the requirement in the ordinance of it being in the form of a certification from the code enforcement office. Do you concur with that?
So, in terms of process, we've issued a formal letter, to the parties involved, outlining what the code office process is going to be regarding the suspension. So we look back at the original component pieces that were brought up in the suspension that we'll address individually based on evidence that's been provided.
So, when Warner advised me that his intention was to put out a more formal response, which would be in the form as provided for in the land use ordinance, which seemed to be the basis of the appeal, and I was in touch with the applicant asking if that we had a deadline to hear the appeal. Would he like to extend that period of time because Warner had expressed his intent to do a response to the suspension, follow-up to the suspension that was in the format that was suggested in the appeal itself. And the applicant's attorney consented and said, yeah, let's not push this to hearing, let's wait. Warner had indicated that he would take until the end of the month of January to do that, which he did. So Warner did that. So the question now is whether or not the appellant will be withdrawing their application or if they want to have a hearing. And so can you enlighten us to that in any degree, Warner, or?
Yes, so
You can feel free to paraphrase.
yes, so both parties agreed to waive the deadlines for the hearing and a decision as suggested by Amy Chow.
Waive the deadline.
So my understanding of that, I haven't seen those communications since Warner's email went out, was that I don't quite follow that myself. It seems that there was an application that was filed. The parties, which really would have been the code office and the appellate, agreed to an extension of time for this board to hear the appeal, so that it afforded Warner an opportunity to respond, as was noted in the appeal, wasn't really in the format that was required by the ordinance. So now that that has been done, I'd like to ask this board, are you with me on this so far, everybody?
I have a question. Has a decision been made whether to lift the suspension or not?
Well, the substance of, that's a fair question. The answer is?
So the formal response has not been submitted to the Bells yet. So we've received evidence from both parties, but we have not formalized our decision yet regarding the suspension.
But didn't you write a letter or issue a certification as the ordinance requires with regard to how you view the suspension at this point in time?
So went through a process of looking at what we had for evidence, and rendered an interpret. There were three component pieces, and so we did communicate with the Bells regarding the first component piece, and then outlined additional information that we were seeking for the other two particular pieces. So a formal written certification regarding the suspension has not been issued yet.
Oh, that wasn't your formal,
No.
Why would we be interested in hearing procedure of an office?
It could be another appeal.
that was the basis of the appeal.
Wasn't the,
But that's not what we do.
We're an appeals board, we're administrative appeal.
Well, if it is,
Procedure, his office's procedure,
well, if there's,
not an error.
well, the appeal, again, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in
Right,
front of
I
me.
remember, that's,
The appeal was that that the code officer's response was not in the format as required by the ordinance. So
Procedure.
therefore, an act of the code enforcement officer did not conform to the requirements of the code, the requirements of the land use ordinance. So that was the basis of the appeal.
and I read that as a process. He didn't follow his procedure, not that there was an error in the application.
Okay, that's one way to read it.
That's,
I,
which doesn't get to us
Well, that
paying
would
us
be,
as an error.
I think that gets to us to decide if it gets to us.
Because they
You
did
do?
make up, they
You do?
made
Not
up,
unlike,
really
the-
do?
not unlike
Like
the
the last
prior appeal, which
Yeah.
was,
yeah,
it's like a preliminary, like, an initial question that needs to be answered, that we can't sit in the back room and do we need to do it
so
publicly.
they've made another appeal. They agreed to waive the deadline, but nobody has withdrawn that appeal, so there's still an appeal sitting on the
The
table.
appeal is pending.
Yeah,
There is no fixed deadline for that extension. And so then maybe I misunderstood your writing to be the certification. I mean, I understood what the thrust of your letter was. So you're saying now that, I'm clarifying my understanding, that your final decision has not been rendered.
Correct. Yep.
And what,
And you're still waiting on information, it sounds like.
Yeah, so we've received, I think at this point, we've received, the information that we're gonna receive.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so you've gathered all the information that you need?
I believe so,
Okay, so now you need some time to review the
Correct.
information and then you'll issue something.
yes.
And then when you issue something, is it your intention to issue it in such a fashion that would address the concern raised in the appeal?
So the lifting of, it's my intent that the lifting of the suspension is going to, specifically address the points in the suspension itself.
Yes.
And so,
you'll do
which
so in some certified form. then?
do so in such a form that would be consistent with the requirements in land use ordinance.
with legal review.
So will the appeal be the lifting of the suspension? Like, is?
We don't
No,
know
no,
that
no.
yet. We don't,
The appeal is really over, I read it that the appeal was of the format that the response to the suspension was given by Warner. Did you read it that way?
Yes.
So they may-
The process of
It's a
how.
they may
process.
amend their,
Process.
they may amend their appeal depending on
Right.
What
the
Well, I-
answer
decision
of the,
is?
I'm not,
It's in limbo.
I think that the appeal is what the appeal is. So it can be heard, or it can be withdrawn. But I guess at this point in time, we're still in a state of suspension,
Correct.
while waiting until you've had your opportunity to review all that you need to review and then respond
Correct.
as you need to respond. Okay,
we had town council for that application, and obviously we'll have it again if we need it,
if we need it.
if we need it.
So it sounds like once they render their decision,
Then something will.
Then the-
they're gonna make a determination whether or not they still wanna have an appeal in place, I would think.
Yeah,
Right, so I thought that your letter had triggered the end of the process, but it hasn't triggered the end of the process. There's still a period of time to go.
Correct.
Okay. So will you be so kind as to let us know when you hit that point in time?
Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
maybe in 2020
And
or
then-
2021.
I'll make
Well,
sure that it
it's-
gets circulated amongst the brethren
And
here.
on the other side of my,
Equation.
the process, for me, as I stated earlier, the second part of my brain is the applicant's whole thing coming forward and our whole hearing was on timeliness. So it's important, I think, for the code office to make sure that the timeliness is kept.
Well, the appeal was timely, I believe, though I'd have to go look at dates and
Yeah.
times, but I believe the appeal was timely. But we'll look at that as to when Warner sent out a particular communication, and then the appeal was of the format of that communication. So if those two things are appropriately timed, then the appeal would be timely. The question is, when is the appeal ripe to be heard?
Yeah,
And they waive deadlines, because usually when an application hits the town office, we have to hear it within so many days,
Unless.
and they've all waived that
And
deadline,
I
so we
believe the
just sit and
language
wait.
is the language unless the parties to the
That's right,
appeal
consent to an extent.
consent to
Consent.
it, which they have. So
Yeah.
now they've continued that consent. And I don't personally need a timeline. I'm very comfortable in waiting for the code office to do its job when it is afforded the time to do its job and has the opportunity to review the materials it needs to review. And then, I think, Wayne, that if the appeal is not withdrawn by the appellant, then it is a pending appeal, which we will schedule for a hearing, but we will have a threshold, you could raise the issue of a threshold issue of, is this an item that properly
Even
comes
should be in
before the
front of-
board? We could
yeah.
discuss that at that time. That sounds more substantive as far as the decision goes, then I wouldn't want to get into that area at this time.
For now, we just gather our papers.
We just sit and wait,
just
Yeah.
don't do anything until
sit and wait.
Amy says,
So, but it would be good if the board could be, you could send it to me, I can make sure it gets spread out, I could go to,
The original stuff,
Oh, yeah.
and the second.
Lisa and spread around, just something that acknowledges it's continued, the parties have continued.
Yep, correct.
Super, thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, anybody else have anything else this evening?
I have one
Will
other
we need
item.
to fill a seat?
Who's around to here?
We got that email that he can't attend meetings. We'll talk
Oh,
about.
Jim,
Yeah,
I didn't think that that was
a long-term thing?
No, well,
I didn't interpret that to be resignation or,
He didn't word it that way, but he said he cannot attend meetings.
until his doctor
Until
gives us
it's-
permission.
Okay,
he's just got a timeout
okay.
by the medical community.
Because we've been tight on making our quorum, so
We're
thank
very
God
tight,
we
that's
were.
another discussion we can have.
Yeah, okay.
What was yours, Juan?
So I want to take an opportunity to introduce to you our new Deputy Code Enforcement Officer, Andrew Welch,
Hey, how you doing?
who's here
Hey,
in
welcome,
attendance
buddy.
tonight.
welcome.
I was wondering who you were.
Oh, just don't worry about me. Sit in the front row.
is he extra?
Yep.
Is
Excuse
he
me?
extra or in place of?
No, Matthew Philbrick returned to his position at the Public Works Department, and so we brought Andrew on board. Andrew comes to us from the Portland Water District, lives here in town, lives in Cape Porpoise, and also brings along with him a good fair amount of building experience as well. So, quite frankly, he's passed the exams quicker than I've seen anybody
Okay.
get through them, so we're happy to have him on board.
Will you be growing a beard?
No, I think,
Then there will be a change of pace.
yeah, still currently active military, I can't grow a beard.
Oh.
That's not authorized.
Questions?
Just want to throw him into this last discussion so that he'll have something to do.
Which,
The last applicant discussion we just.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Throw him right in the middle of it.
That's right. Code, everyone in the code office has been well-versed in this particular case.
Okay, I just wanted to have something on the record here.
Mhm.
All right, everybody. Well, anything else? Any other matters?
I have no other matters.
Anybody on the board? I'll entertain a motion to
Motion to adjourn.
adjourn.
second?
All in favor? So adjourned.